Yo, what's up guys, John Boogle here. Today we got the Redux Great Escaper Guide, of course the Ururun Wolf guide. This time it's without true forms, so the strategy changes up a bit, and of course the units you bring changes up a lot. In this case, we are using some crazed cats to fill in some holes, but if you don't have crazed cats, then you could just bring other gacha units. And if you don't have those, then of course we can just go with true forms. But I'll explain that more in depth a bit later. Firstly, we're going to cover the no true forms part of the guide. It's going to require more specific units, but at the same time, the level requirements are going to be much lower. At level 25 to level 20 even. Now the old guide still works just as I said previously, but people look at it and get very intimidated with all the normal levels and true forms, but that was also without using any crazed cats and using very minimal gacha, with only Cyborg being the only gacha option in that guide. Now onto the lineup explanation. First of all, of course, your stallers or meat shields, of course, you want to bring a minimum of 3, 4 is recommended, especially with this low level unit. Crazed Macho and Cube Cat can be replaced by Samba and Cat Burger or Coin Cat, etc. Now onto one of the first core parts of the lineup, and that's our anti-reds. So there is a red boar in the stage, and it is a menace, especially with such low levels. And in this guide, we're using Crazed Whale as an accessible substitute for other anti-reds that we'll mention later. But Crazed Whale, super easy to get, and you can get it with level 20 units. Yes, you can get Crazed Whale in the beginner phase and it will dominate with its low cost, its decent recharge, its high health, and decent DPS as well, especially against red, and it is able to get hits on Ururun Wolf in the stage as well. Now our second anti-red unit here is Bath. Now this is very optional. A lot of units can fulfill the role Bath does, but since our units are pretty low level, we need that heavy burst damage from Bath. Now when I actually played through the stage for the first time on this account, I quickly figured out that my DPS against red enemies were extremely low and I needed Bath Cat. If you want to see that video where I beat Ururun Wolf for the first time on this account, it is right there. I do recommend watching it because there is some more info in that video as well, even though it is not a guide. Now if you happen to not have an extra anti-red DPS unit, then you can use other generic units like Castaway, Pole Vaulter, Figure Skating Cats, Ring Girl, Crazy UFO even, as just some extra DPS options. Now if you do have those anti-reds, stuff like Viking Cat can work really well. The true form, of course, very powerful. Then there's Swordsmaster as well. Once again, the true form will melt the boar. Ramen can work as an extra meat shield while dealing extra damage and sustaining. And of course, Mercat's true form, Cameraman, is powerful for the stage. With its good DPS, its great survivability, and low cost. Now as for crowd control units that will slow, freeze, or weaken, knockback, don't recommend in this stage. Now if you have the help of true forms, then you can sacrifice a DPS unit or two and get some crowd control units in your lineup. But with such low level units as we have now, taking off a crucial DPS unit for a crowd control unit can really make things unfavorable. But if you have the help of true form units and you aren't lacking in DPS, then you can fill in units like Witch Cat or iCat, as long as you're confident enough in your main attacker to carry. In this case, our main attackers are pretty low level across the board, so we are going with no crowd control units. And Dragon here is once again to fill a main attacker role. It will stack up with all of the other attackers, increasing our total DPS output, and is very helpful against the Arost phase with its nice range. Also, if you happen to have Crazed Dragon, then this will be a complete joke, because then you could just dual dragon stack and just shred Arost or the boards that come your way. And a reminder here, if you don't have true forms or gachas, all the crazed cats are pretty powerful in the stage, so if you just get some of the crazed cats, you can sweep by this very easy. Crazed Wall, Dragon, and Whale being the most important ones in this case. Now there are some wild card units that can fulfill the crowd control role, but also dealing good amounts of damage. Things like Sushi or Hip Hop / Dancing Flasher or Can in its true form, and Row in its true form. Even if it's not in true form, units like these at level 20 can really fill in a slot in the stage, but getting those true forms will completely carry the stage. But even then, as an example, Sushi has good DPS against reds, its weaken ability against red, but it's also resistant, so it's an all-around unit for the stage and it can help out tremendously, even if it's not true formed. Another unit that can fit in this wildcard category is Hacker Cat / Cyberpunk. Cyberpunk completely destroys the stage at true form, of course, as always it does, but even just Hacker at level 20 works very well. Other than that, as for Ubers goes, literally any Uber can work, because Bahamut here is our slot-in Uber for the stage, meaning it's replaceable by any other Uber that can fulfill its role with its range and damage, and there's a lot of similar Ubers like that. But Bahamut is nice because of Aras, but let's say you're really struggling with Red Boar and you have anti-red Ubers, then go ahead and use those. You can always try substituting a main attacker and slotting in another Uber, but the main reason Crazed Bahamut is here is 1, to be accessible, and 2, because we can use it against Ururun Wolf, because it outranges Ururun Wolf and we can get nice damage done there, and Aras as well. But other than that, get creative. Remember, this is a guide, doesn't mean you have to copy the exact same lineup. Guides are heavily misused in this community, with people just loading up a video, copying the lineup and hopping in the stage, then they lose and they question what they did wrong. The lineup is not the most important part of the guide, it's the strategy. You're never supposed to follow a guide to a 1-to-1 ratio, because everyone's account is different. So take apart the info that you need and use it to your advantage. Like, the old guide still works and there's still very useful information in that old guide. So watch guides and take information from them and use them to your advantage. Don't just copy the lineup and expect to beat the stage. That's not what guides are for. If you're still unsure of what I mean, here's a really good example of how to use a guide. Highly recommend watching that video. But yeah, that about covers the lineup explanation. Let's hop into the strategy. Now, of course, you do want to bring a treasure radar because the drop rate is horrendous, and I only recommend bringing it when you're confident enough you can beat the stage, so don't waste your treasure radars. Beat the stage first, then come back and use a treasure radar and do it again. Other power-ups that can help is Sniper Cat power-up and CPU. It's not needed though. Speed up is also nice for the beginning. Now, the beginning is very similar to the previous guide, but in that old guide I mentioned that you might want to stack 2 Bahamuts if your Bahamut is level 20. But this time it's a bit different because we don't have enough DPS to handle Aras. So what we want to do is actually stack up a Bahamut in the beginning here, but not 2, if that makes sense. A big part of beating stages is understanding how enemy cycles work, because we can use that information to, of course, on the flip side, use our units to match or counter the enemy cycle with our own cycle. So sending out Bahamut here and letting the second one recharge will set up a perfect cycle to where in the beginning Bahamut is there to clean up some of the big threats when you hit the base, but as soon as it's time for that Aras to come out and the cycle to start, that's when we send out our second Bahamut to, of course, cycle it on Aras. Because let's say if we were to stack 2 Bahamuts in the beginning here, both of them would hit the base, then both of them would die before Aras arrives, unless you get extremely lucky, meaning you have no defense for Aras with your low-leveled attackers. So cycling 1 Bahamut for Aras is very crucial with these low-level units. Now, when you see your Bahamut is at 60 or 70% recharge, that's when you want to start pushing. If you want to be extra safe, you can wait till it's fully recharged. But a key thing is when it is fully recharged, you do not want to send it out immediately. You want to save it for that Aras cycle. Now, the most you want to expect out of the Bahamut you initially send out in the beginning here is to clean up some of the shadow boxers in the beginning and maybe get some nice hits on the red boar that initially comes out. Also, a big thing is before you hit the base, make sure your attackers are up there with Bahamut, because he needs that support. Don't send them out when you hit the base, send them out when you're pushing with Bahamut. A key thing throughout, make sure sniper is disabled or do not use cannon every time Bahamut is attacking. You don't want to make Bahamut miss those crucial hits. Now, once again, the most you want to expect out of the Bahamut in the beginning here is to wipe out the shadow boxers or the SBKs and maybe get a couple hits on the board. If you're extremely lucky, you'll be able to keep Bahamut alive until the Aras arrives. Then you'll have 2 Bahamuts in cycle for Aras, but that's very unlikely unless you have like mega leveled units. Now, this is when your anti-red units will shine. You want to burst down boar as fast as possible, and that is Bath's sole purpose in this level. Because we lack the DPS, we need the help from Bath's burst damage. Also, Crazed Whale, tremendous unit as well, will be able to hold off against boar and get nice damage as well, and it's also good enough to get hits on the boss of the stage. Now, just keep playing it out until you eventually kill this boar, but as soon as you kill the boar, stop sending out your anti-red units and start preparing for the Aras wave. Even though it's just 1 Aras, you still need to prepare. Now, you must be wondering how I haven't mentioned Ururun Wolf in this guide yet. Why haven't I mentioned it yet? You see, if you're using Crazed Bahamut or anti-traitless Ubers or something, The main boss of the stage is not really an issue at all. The main focus in the stage is the red boar and Arost. If you focus on those two things and handle everything else on the side, things will become much more easier. Now, as we previously set up our cycle, Arost is here, and that's when we send out our second CRAZED Bahamut. During this time, also refrain from spawning in your anti-raid units and only send out your units that outrange Arost and are good enough to get some nice damage on it as well. Stuff like Paris, Drama, Dragon, CRAZED Dragon. Just funnel your cash into those units and you'll efficiently be able to take out Arost without getting too low on cash. Now, of course, it's not always going to be that simple. With such low level units, of course, we're not going to be able to take out Arost instantly. Now, when this happens, Boar comes in front of Arost. That's when we want to start to send out our anti-raid units. This is another situation where anti-raid DPS is very important, even more important than our anti-traitless DPS. Because once we're in this situation where Boar is in front of Arost, we have to burst down the Boar as fast as possible. And this is the most difficult part of the stage. Once you make it past this, then you're pretty much set for the rest of the level, because the second half of the level is just bullying Ururun Wolf with stacking Bahamut and cycling attackers. But just like that, with our crazy amount of stacked units and Bath to help out with the burst DPS, Boar is shredded in a few seconds there. Now we can really focus on Arost and wipe it out here. Now if you don't take out Arost right here, then you're in even bigger trouble. At that point, I just recommend closing your app and retrying the stage, because once that boar comes in front of Arost, you're pretty much out of options, being so close to the base. Now even here, we were cutting it pretty close, but with the help of our Paris stack and Dragon slowly stacking up, and of course our Bahamut cycle, we were able to get nice hits on Arost previously, so it was a very crippled Arost. We just managed to finish off Arost. Now at this point, all you want to do is send out your main stallers, Crazed Whale in this situation, and every time the boar wave comes, that's when you send out your anti-raid units, of course. Then just cycle your attackers on Ururun Wolf until you beat the stage. Don't just constantly spam Paris or your attackers that will just go in and get killed by Ururun Wolf, but smartly cycle them to where they could actually get one hit off every now and then, and eventually you'll be able to beat the stage. Now Bahamut, or your anti-traitless Uber, or whatever unit you're using in substitute for Bahamut, is going to do the heavy carrying for this portion of the fight. You are in a timer, however. It is 15 minutes, but just keep in mind, if you take too long, then Assassin Bear will come out and you will lose. But even with such low level units, just cycling Bahamut and attackers every now and then is just enough to kill Wolf and efficiently beat the stage. And bam, that's pretty much it. Of course, if you're using Hacker, you can stack that up with Bahamut in the beginning of the level and get some extra damage, but that's pretty much it. Drop a like if this guide helped you out, subscribe if you're new, join the hashtag Boogle gang. Link to the Discord is in the description down below, go check it out. All the videos mentioned in this guide also linked down below. But yeah, it's been John Boogle, and see ya.